Okay, I'm finally talking about modulations, and I'm going to try to do it efficiently. I'm going to try. I've already talked a bunch about borrowed chords. In the previous videos, the brown bordered, thumbnailed videos are all about using things from outside of a key temporarily and then incorporating them back into that key. Now, those could be considered, as I've mentioned before, temporary modulations. They normally wouldn't be, but you could. It's arbitrary. There's no hard and fast definition of a modulation. A modulation just means a change in key. And what defines a change in key? Well, really, it's just staying there long enough to feel settled, whatever that means. It could be a couple of chords. It could be whatever. That would be a modulation. That's what would normally be called a modulation. It's just if you feel settled in a new place, without like, are we going back to the other? You're just like, you're in this new place, and that's the new normal. Well, okay, that's a change, key change, modulation. Okay. Now, modulations are all. The way I'm going to talk about them is on a spectrum between abrupt and subtle. Okay, sudden, unexpected, and startling on the one end, and smooth, not even noticed, and sophisticated on the other. And there's no good or bad here. It's really, there's a time to kill and a time to heal in music. So let's talk about the abrupt end first of all. That's kind of the easy end of things. It's easy to understand how you might be playing in the key of C, for example, doing normal stuff there, playing the 1, 4, 5, maybe the C, F, G, whatever. And then all of a sudden you jump to, let's say, some chord that definitely doesn't belong to the key of C, D flat. Okay, just jump to D flat, and then you stay in D flat, and you play stuff that belong. Let's say you treat D flat as a new tonic, and then you play stuff that belong in that new place. Well, that's going to be abrupt. But once you make that abrupt shift, there are two different things you can do. I'm simplifying that once you get there that are going to create very different experiences for the listener. To reinforce, here's the scenario. Playing the key of C. Okay. Some little thing. Okay, and okay, now I'm in the key of D flat. What am I going to do while I'm there? This still makes a difference in terms of how abrupt and shocking the modulation is because of memory. So, two things I can do when I get there. I can do some familiar thing I've already done. This is the more common thing I can do. So, shift. Okay. You saw what I did there? I just repeated the same idea. 1, 4, 5, same rhythm and everything. I just shifted it up and then did the same thing I was doing before. 1, 4, 5, but just in D flat. That is very common in music. It's the most common form of abrupt shifts, abrupt modulations. It's often done towards the end of songs when there's a building excitement. That's super common in, say, gospel music, but also lots of pop songs, tons. And yeah, because you're doing something familiar once you get there, it's immediately like, oh, okay, it's a familiar idea. And I definitely noticed the shift. It's like, whoa, okay, here's the shift, but accepted right away because I know what we're doing here. So there's a sense of familiarity right away. Okay, we're in a world just like the other one. It's just a little different. We're doing the same stuff in it. Very, very common. Off the top of my head, the two favorite songs that I can think of that happen to have this form of modulation in them would be Sugar by Stevie Wonder. Look at that song, so good. Just so much energy in it, and it is really just a classic. Like towards the end of the song, it just like shifts it up, maybe a whole tone, maybe a half tone, I don't know. But it's just like, and he's doing the same stuff, and you just like shifts it up. Anyway, very common thing. You'll recognize that kind of thing if you go listen to it. You'll be like, oh, I know that from other songs. Good. Also in Friends by the Beach Boys. I love that. They do it right away at the beginning of the verse. It's like, we've been friends now for so many years. Da, 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 da. What did they do? They just shifted the same melodic idea and chord progression up. Maybe it's a half step. I don't know. I haven't analyzed it either, but it's either a half step or a whole step. And because you're doing the same thing, you're just like, oh, I know what we're doing here. It's okay. I'm with you. We're good. I noticed the shift, yeah, but I'm okay. So that's on the abrupt end. Now, to make it even more abrupt, you would just not do the familiar stuff. You would do something else while you're there. Maybe it has a different rhythm. That would really, throw things off. And you go to different chords you haven't gone to in the original key. In the new key, you're doing stuff. So in the original key, you've done 1, 4, 5, 1, 4, 5, let's say. In the new key, you're going to go 1, 6, 2, 3, 3, 3, 4, whatever. Just new idea. And the melody is different and the feel is different. Okay, that's not only an abrupt shift, but when you're there, you're like, okay, this is somewhere totally different. So that's going to not only draw attention to itself in terms of the modulation, but it's going to be more than just a temporarily, one just like a temporary little shift of like, okay, we're just raising things up a notch. No, it's going to be like we're somewhere else, very else, just not where we were. Okay, that's on the abrupt end. Now, how do you make things subtle is the big question. Well, I've already touched on this in all the videos talking about borrowed chords. You find connections and you emphasize those connections. Connections between what? Connections between the original key and the destination key. Now, when you're talking about shifting from one key to another, those connections can be not just individual notes within a chord, say right before the change. They can be whole chords or even a series of chords that are common to both keys. So, for example, the key of G and C. The key of C has, just like all major keys, it's got 3 major chords, 3 minor chords, and 1 weird diminished, the 7. The 7 chord, that's the one that's not going to be common to any other keys because every major key has 1 as a 7 chord and they're all different. So never mind that one. And it's the least common used anyway. So, but 1, 4, 5 are going to be major. 2, 3, 6 are going to be minor, and some of those are going to occur in other keys. Now, that's true of C and G. In the key of C, you've got C major. That's your 1 chord. D minor, your 2 chord. E minor, F major, G major, and A minor. Those are your 6 main chords of that key. Okay, in the key of G, I have G major, A minor, B minor, C major, D major, and E minor. Okay, well, 4 of those were common. If you didn't keep track, that's fine. It was the C, the E minor, G, A minor. So 2 majors and 2 minors are normal chords in both the key of C and the key of G. Okay, so what I could do is if I'm in the key of C and I want to go to the key of G, I'll play a few of those chords, maybe a few of them in a row. Maybe I'll sit on the E minor or the G for a while and then go do something else and go back. Anyway, what am I doing? Well, for all you know, as a listener, I'm just doing stuff in the key of C. But what I'm actually doing, unbeknownst to you, is I'm preparing your mind for a shift. And so I'm going to eventually go to a D major and then a G. Now, a D major doesn't belong in the key of C. It does belong in the destination key, the key of G. In that key, it's the dominant chord, the 5 chord. Look at the video on the 5 chord. You go to the 5 chord and then say the G. And then you just play stuff that belongs to G, including stuff that does not belong to C. And then you're like, oh, we're in G now. Now, that's not what you say to yourself, actually. It's more like, oh. Or you might not even say anything because you might just notice a change in feeling, but not a change in the music. Like the music is giving you feelings, but it's not drawing attention to itself as a shift. Inevitably, there's going to be a point where you hear something that doesn't belong to the original key. At that point, you're going to think something like, is this normal? Is this expected? Is this something is like, oh, huh? And it's either going to be like, oh yeah, I think this fits. Or you're going to be like, no, that doesn't fit. That's different. Where are we going from here? The way to create the first feeling of like, oh yeah, I think maybe that's normal. I think we were already in this world, is if you've already done stuff that also belongs to this new world. So that in memory, you think back, you're like, what were the last few chords? Obviously, you can't do it exactly like that, but in terms of feeling, that's what's going on. You're like, what? And it's like, yeah, right, yeah, this fits, yeah, right? And maybe it's not even a question. You're just like, oh, yeah, nice. That's how you do it in brief, in summary. A couple of last little points about that. And I'm just going to talk about this generally and end the video. And if I want to get into more specifics, or if you want me to get into more specifics, let me know, and I'll do further videos on modulations. But for now, a couple of brief ideas in the line of what I was already saying. You can, let's say you're going to do that. You want to create a subtle modulation. One way to do it, even if you don't use multiple connecting chords, maybe you just hit one chord and you sit on it for a while. And then you go to another chord that connects to that chord, but not the chord before it. Just the fact of sitting on that chord for a little longer can change the listener's experience and be like, prepare them for something different. Also, another brief idea, you can hint at things before you actually fully go to them. So you could, for instance, use let's say a borrowed chord or just a borrowed note. Let's say I'm in the key of C and I hit an F sharp at some point. Well, F sharp doesn't belong to the key of C, but it does in the key of G. It's the 7 in the key of G. Maybe we go F sharp G. That's a 7/8 or 7/1. That's like a movement to the tonic. It's a leading tone to the tonic in the key of G. I just do that a little bit while I'm playing, but then I'm still playing stuff in the key of C. But then soon after, I play a D major chord, which includes an F sharp in it, and I go to G, and it's like, okay, now I'm definitely in G. So I've just planted a little seed. I was just like, oh, maybe F sharp. No, I'm just playing F sharp G. Here we are in G. Okay, we're in G. Nice, smooth. Okay, so that's how you do it in brief overview. Yeah, that's good for now.